Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Veritas Live. I'm your host, Demetrius Malbro, and I'm coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. And today's episode is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're going to get into how all of that fits into our beautiful world of technology. And so I'm super excited to introduce you to our first ever all-female panel here at Live. And before I do that, where are you watching from? As always, let us know in the comments. We love to see it. And as it turns out, and in the spirit of this episode, I also just learned that my home in Atlanta resides on land formerly inhabited by the indigenous Cherokee East and Muskogee tribes. Now, how do I know this? Well, Native Land Digital created this cool interactive map where you can type in the address and also find out more about the indigenous lands that you live on. We've also included a link to that map below if you want to check it out. And so today we're here to talk about diversity in tech. And it's 2023, and we have more than a few data points on this. And we also know that workplace diversity is super critical for many reasons. Now, laying some groundwork here, I'd be remiss not to mention the powerful historical events from the last few years alone. And we also had some compelling social justice movements in 2020 during the onset of a global pandemic. And we've seen shifting employment landscapes as well, in the ever-evolving work culture trying to do better with its own DE&I initiatives. And we've also started to learn more about the critical importance of diversity within that work culture. So Forbes also summarizes with some research that states the following: companies with a diverse workforce are 35% more likely to experience greater financial returns than their respective non-diverse counterparts. Also, employers are still not embracing diversity. So that's 41% of managers admit to being too busy to even implement diversity and inclusion programs. Now, I can go on about this, but I'd rather get to introducing our incredible guest. And for any questions that happen to come up from our audience today, go ahead and ask those questions in the chat, and we'll do what we can to get to them, or we'll follow up after the show. All right. I have an excellent panel joining me today. I have Soniya, Heather, and Rayvn. Why don't you please go ahead and introduce yourselves? And also, for the purpose of inclusivity, we're going to do things a little differently here, and we're going to welcome for you to share maybe a brief visual description of what you look like for any of our viewers who may be blind or have low vision. So let's start with you, Soniya, and then we'll go to Heather and then Rayvn. So Soniya, why don't you start us off here?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Soniya Bopache, Vice President of Engineering at Veritas. My team is responsible for delivering data governance and compliance solution. I have born, raised in India, and have been working in the Silicon Valley for over 13 years. Today, I'm wearing pink. In my opinion, it's not just a color, it's an attitude, and it is what makes life sweeter. So really, coming back to my participation in this video, I quickly want to touch upon that I'm a significant believer in acknowledging and addressing the obstacle and biases that hinder individuals from accessing the necessary resources and opportunities to succeed. Striving to establish an equitable environment where everyone has a fair opportunity to achieve success, regardless of their background or circumstances. Veritas as an organization has empowered me to do this every day, which I am proud to say I have been a part of over a decade. It's really a super awesome feeling to be here.
Awesome. I love that, Soniya. It's not a color, it's an attitude. So keep up that pink attitude so we can all strive to do better, bigger and better things. Heather, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Demetrius. And thank you everyone on this panel for joining this conversation today. I'm coming to you live from my living room in Boulder, Colorado. I have dark curly hair and a dark sweater on, and I'm wearing my favorite pendant that my nephew made with some beautiful stones. And I really am eager to talk about the journey that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, both within ourselves and within the organizations that we work in. And it really is a journey. So I look forward to exploring that with all of you today.
Sounds like your nephew is super creative. So I really would like to know what crystals are in that necklace, but we can talk about that maybe after the show. Rayvn, last but not least.
Hello, I am Rayvn Manuel, and I am coming to you from the top of a mountain in Winchester, Virginia. I am a light-skinned African-American female with short, curly brown hair. I am wearing a light gray hoodie with necklaces, and I'm sitting in my office, which is surrounded by bookcases. I work for the I have to say the whole thing, or else I'm not going to get it right. The National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a unit within the Smithsonian Institute. I am a senior application developer and a DevOps engineer. My primary job, among other hats, is research and development. And with research and development, my focus is one, to make the visitor experience delightful and enhance it. I am truly focused, at least this year, I'm always focused on accessibility, but this year I wanted to challenge myself and focus on neurodiversity. I implement the more simple interactives that you play with in the museum, and I've noticed that those interactives they're created by the educators and the curators, and what they're trying to do is capture your feelings or capture whether or not the exhibit was educational. And my quandary is that we haven't been able to capture the feelings and the educational experience for adults, children that are neurodiverse. So that's my challenge, is to try to make interactives or maybe secondary interactives that work for neurodiverse so we can capture their feelings.
Well, awesome, Rayvn. Thank you for explaining that. And one thing you may not be able to see was a picture in the background of a young Black girl with an afro that's super awesome, which caught my eye. But super excited once again to have each and every one of you here. And let's go ahead and in typical Veritas Live fashion, we're going to kick things off with an icebreaker. And today I want to hear about something that's not on your resume. What's something we'd be surprised to know about you? And Heather, why don't you get started?
Sure. Well, I have a love for music. And in recent years, I've sort of extended that passion to bird songs. So I've gotten really into bird watching, and I can actually identify birds by their beautiful songs. Probably about a dozen birds so far I can predictably identify.
That's pretty cool. Let's roll on with you, Rayvn.
I like to sew, and my favorite things to sew is costumes. So I do costume design, and mostly for my kids and for myself. And I make my favorite event a Renaissance fair. So I go to the Renaissance fair in Colorado and in Maryland, and I'm thinking about one in Pennsylvania. But I recently went to the Bridgerton Ball, had to watch that whole series because I had no idea, and made a gown to go to the ball. So I really like sewing and designing costumes.
Awesome. I'll have to put an order in later as well for custom design on one of my shirts. Soniya, what about you?
Sure. And I had the same thought, by the way. Okay, so I love biking, especially with my 5 years old. My son has turned our biking hobby into a high-stake games of follow the leader. He leads, I follow, and we both hope we don't end up in a ditch.
Nice, nice. All right, so I can imagine you're all ready to get into it now. And let's start with a baseline to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Let's talk about how you define DE&I and also how you would measure its success, and especially as it relates to your experiences. And Rayvn, why don't you shed some light on this for us?
Thanks, Demetrius. This is whenever I have to do anything like a conversation, I do what you just said. I like to get to, let's make sure that we're all talking about the same thing so that we don't make problems in our conversation. And I recently had this conversation with my class. I teach on the weekends, and I asked them, what do they think diversity and inclusion mean? Given that they actually seem to be different, right? You have diversity and then you have inclusion. But for me and for most of my students, they thought that diversity is bringing in diverse thoughts, diverse practices, diverse conversations in the tech world into technology, right? When you're talking about technology or looking at something, a business problem from different perspective. The inclusivity part is, now that you've talked about it, integrating it into your projects and into your policies and making it definitely accessible for everybody to be able to understand, and whatever way you're delivering it to make it accessible that way. So that's what I feel, is that it's not just color or gender or a demographic. It's actually an ideal and a philosophy. And when you take that, you have to metricize it, like you were talking, so that you can figure out how to put that into your practice.
All right. I love that. I love that. Soniya, you have anything to add here?
Sure. To me, diversity, equity, and inclusion is an ongoing process of fostering a sense of belonging among all members of the organization. It is really important, not only for ethical or moral reasons, or we should say that it is extremely critical for the success and growth of organization. As you touched upon initially, that research shows that diverse and inclusive teams are far more innovative, productive, and profitable. I really feel that the measuring the success in this space can be challenging, because it truly requires taking an approach of a comprehensive analysis and considering the multiple factors and indicators. So ultimately, it requires a long-term commitment, sustained efforts, as well as a willingness to continuously assess and improve the practices around this framework.
Okay, awesome. Great. And Heather, you also have something to add as well, right?
Sure. Yeah, I would add that, being that this is a journey, it's great to start with checking in about where you are on this journey, both individually and within your organization. Where's the organization? If we think of it as a continuum from awareness to, fully sustainable, there are a lot of stages in between. So just getting a baseline is really important. And when it comes to metrics and measuring, establishing those baselines is really important. So that effort, to establish your baseline and to ask those questions can be really difficult. You have to ask really honest questions and reflect about where you really are as an individual and as an organization.
Okay, awesome.
Demetrius, can I add something just to the metric, because I'm listening to what we're all saying, but practically, right, there is an ideal of what we want to measure, but practically, it really depends on the company. I think that part of the issue is that when you metricize something, you actually have to make numbers. And so it seems to me like the lazy way is to create a number that you have to meet and then trying to meet that number. And that's not really a way to measure, although it's relevant and it's valid if you find your senior management a little like disparity, and when you have like not diverse thoughts. So I think the metric size, if you get too numeric about it, then you lose the whole purpose of it, about it, especially since Soniya was talking about the process and Heather's talking about the journey. You really can't put a number on it.
Yeah. Very important point. There has to be a balance with the metrics and the ability to achieve the metrics. And also that silver lining is the relationship that's built between the people that are working together. And sometimes I think that is left to the wayside, especially after COVID. It's more of a face behind a screen instead of a relationship that individuals have an opportunity to build together. I have a follow-up question to ask around DE&I, and also, just in light of some of the recent tragic events that happened, and maybe they're not so recent, but things happen all the time that reminds us of, just the situation that we're all in from a DE&I perspective. Just in light of some of the tragic events that have happened in the past, and I'll start with you, Heather. What do you think about some of those occurrences, and also what do you think about that?
I think what you're bringing up is a really important point in building inclusive work environments. I think a few years ago, when George Floyd was murdered and Black Lives Matter became part of our national conversation, that in the workplace, that these conversations, people didn't know how to have these conversations at work. And some people were actually tuned out entirely to what was happening. So I think it's just a really great example of why we need individuals. We need to start within ourselves to explore this space and understand where we are, what are our own biases, even just starting with a basic understanding of our own identities and how we relate to other people, because we all actually have multiple identities, probably that I'm a mother, I'm a woman in tech, I'm a linguist. I bring all of these different facets of myself to work, as does everyone else. So starting with that understanding, so that then I can kind of broaden my perspective and understand how I relate to other people and their identities, and can appreciate the rising identities in the workplace, people who've been historically underrepresented, or who may feel like they have to leave part of themselves at home in order to be more accepted or assimilate in the workplace. And we know with all of the research that you've cited, and that I've read, that this really damages companies' ability to innovate and to do great things for the world.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Heather, and being open about that as well. Let's say Rayvn or Soniya, would one of you like to chime in on this as well? Or both, maybe?
Go ahead, Soniya, right. I'll go after you.
Sure, thank you. I agree what Heather said. I think, in my opinion, the impact of these initiatives varies depending on the specific context and the goals of the initiative. DE&I initiative have the potential to create the positive change. But again, as I said, it requires a long-term commitment from everyone in the organization to be truly effective. It's not a one-time fix, but rather a process of learning, growth, and action. So it's really important to continue to evaluate and refine these initiatives to ensure that they are having the desired impact and to address any ongoing issues or challenges.
My perspective is that I work for an awesome organization. Did I tell you that I have the best job ever? I should have told you that. For the Smithsonian, we have so many, the whole point of our existence is knowledge and education and having those difficult conversations and not shying away from those societal conversations. And sometimes, I mean, organizational wise, we kind of, I don't think we get in trouble. It's just that there's a strong reaction, right? There's a very strong reaction to what we're saying. But I think the fact that we have a range of cultural units, we call them units, that the whole point is to make people educated. So when you come to, I don't know, the National Museum of the American Indian, you learn about that, not only that culture, but the integration and the interaction between other cultures that you may not have known that exists. I'm excited that the Women's History Museum is going to be created to tell the story from the perspective of women and not necessarily a particular culture, which totally will integrate all of the other things that we've had in the different museums.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rayvn. I appreciate you answering that question. Let's move along here. And I want to specifically talk about the organizational impact around DE&I. So will you share a little bit about the role of the CEO or a leader within an organization and how or what that leader should be doing and playing as it is in terms of setting diversity? So Soniya, why don't you lead us on this one?
Sure. So an organization leader has a very critical role to play in setting diversity initiatives within an organization. Some of the examples that are coming in my mind is, say, developing DE&I strategy, having employee resource groups, setting diversity goals, holding leaders accountable, and clearly measuring the progress. But it is not solely his or her responsibility. It truly requires a collective effort. A leader can certainly help us outline the vision, the strategy, and empower us to build the framework, but it's really up to every individual to make it effective and productive. Since you also touched upon, like, hey, is it going to help with the efforts if we unlock more budget? So see, increasing the budget and headcount for this effort can be helpful. But there are many other effective ways that organizations can change or embrace to increase the diversity within the tech industry. For example, building diverse hiring pipelines, engaging in community outreach, fostering a culture of openness and acceptance, and diversifying the leadership. So I think all in all, if we together demonstrate these values every day and live up to them, I think a world will be a better place for sure.
Okay, well, I want to move things along here, and we have a few more questions that I would like to get to. The one thing that I'm curious to hear from each of you with your broad swath of experiences, can you give us some examples of how increased diversity has propelled or impacted a solution or product? And Rayvn, what have you seen around this?
From my perspective, from where I work, the thing that I have seen is more focus on making our exhibitions and our collections more accessible to not just blind and low vision, but people who can't hear. So the Hurford Museum has audio feeds from the artists and making that so that they can experience that. One of the things I worry about is that we have all of these QR codes that if you want to know more about the exhibit, then you use your smartphone to scan the QR code, but not everybody has a smartphone, right? So that it's not accessible to them. So technologically wise, my focus and what I'm seeing across our organization is trying to make knowledge and education more accessible for people who are not able to get the knowledge or the education.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And Heather, maybe a short chime in from you on this one. And I want to get to another question as well. So Heather.
Yes, I'll cite the really relatable example for all of us on this call, at least, and probably most of our audience uses a smartphone. And the makers of these phones have put a lot of effort in recent years into camera technology that detects various skin tones and lighting conditions in more effective ways. So I think that's a really, tangible example. If you know the history of Kodak and skin tones in photography, you can appreciate that this is progress.
Sure. And maybe I would like to just add a quick example there. And this is coming from our portfolio. So data compliance and governance solutions, we are developing a workflows that allows for the capturing of a smart transcripts from audio and video artifacts. So to accomplish this, we are training our machine learning models using a wide variety of diverse data. This approach, it's really allowing us to improve the accuracy and effectiveness of our models, ensuring that our solutions can capture and analyze the data from a variety of sources. Overall, really the goal is to provide our customers with a powerful tools for managing and protecting the data while ensuring that the compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. So some of these examples that I think we all quoted here that shows that increasing diversity in the development of technology can lead to more inclusive and accurate products that work for a better range of users. By bringing diverse perspectives and experiences to the development process, companies can create technology that meets the need of a more diverse population.
Okay, Sonia, thank you for that. And also just to move on to the next question here, and to make sure everyone had an opportunity to answer this question around maybe some examples of how increased diversity has propelled or also impacted a solution or product. I think everyone had an opportunity to answer, but if anyone else wants to chime in, that would be great before I move on to the next question. All right. Well, moving on now to some of the resources. As some of you have shared some resources with us that you think our audience should tap into that would make an impact on increasing DE&I within the tech sector. And Heather, specifically, I think you shared a comprehensive reading list with us, and we also have a link to it below. Would you give us a plug for that first?
Sure, I'd love to. It goes back to what I said at the start of this, that as individuals, we have a responsibility to do our own work and our own reflection and really be curious about how we can ourselves be allies and create inclusive environments. And that starts with understanding where you are on this journey and where your blind spots may be. So I've put together a list of not just books, but there are also some podcasts, I'll do a shameless plug for a previous employer and say that the LinkedIn Learning path for this topic is excellent. There's one designed for everyone, and there's another designed specifically for managers and leaders. I just completed that yesterday. So I would encourage everyone watching this live and after the fact to take a look at that list. If you have a suggestion, I'd love to add things to it. Most of what's there are things that I have actually read or consumed myself. So if you want to have a conversation, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and learn from you on my journey.
Awesome. Thanks for that list. And Rayvn, do you have anything to add to the list for the audience to maybe, take a look at some items around DE&I?
I'm always going to come back to the Smithsonian. You know that, right?
I already know that, but I have to ask anyway.
That's okay. The Smithsonian has a Smithsonian affiliations program. And on the website, or if you Google Smithsonian DE&I, you'll find that page, and it talks about community and outreach and being able to reach out to ready for our partners through the affiliation program. And they also talk about relationship, because we've been talking about relationships. And so that's what the three goals for DE&I for the Smithsonian affiliations. It is for partners of the Smithsonian, but that is a focus to bring in the community, so that the lift isn't just from the inside of the Smithsonian, it also comes from the outside.
Okay, that's wonderful. And we've covered a lot of ground here today. And I also feel like we've only scratched the surface as it relates to DE&I, but we're out of time right now. And I really want to give a big thanks to Soniya, Heather, and Rayvn for being here. This has been a great discussion. We really appreciate your time here today. And just maybe last minute shout outs for each and every one of you at this moment before I give some closing remarks here. Heather, why don't you go ahead?
Well, this is labradorite and tiger's eye, Demetrius, just so we don't
okay. I
forget
love
to hit that point. And thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to everyone on the panel for being part of this conversation. This is how we make progress. So I'm really honored to be here.
Awesome. Soniya.
Yes, it was exciting to have this conversation with my other two lovely panelists, and thank you for everyone for listening in.
All right, Rayvn.
Shout out to Veritas. I didn't even know you guys did anything like this. It's great that you are having this particular forum. Very surprised it's all women, but I think that I don't even know if I would even know that you guys even did this. So you've made me aware. So I'm going to bookmark your website.
All right. Thank you all again. And before we go, hang on a little bit. Before we go, we've shared some other links below that I would like to call out as well. And I also watched a Netflix documentary that's pretty cool, and it's called Coded Bias. And it follows an MIT Media Lab researcher who uncovers prejudice toward women and also dark-skinned faces and facial recognition technology. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that one. And also Veritas has published some great blogs this month. You can check them out on veritas.com, because we're also celebrating Black History Month, honoring our heroes and role models. And there's a great write-up of acknowledgments there as well. So thanks again for joining us today. And it was great to be here with all of you. Be sure to tune in on March the 21st for our next episode of Veritas Live. And until then, stay secure and back up often. Thank you.